and we improved it. And this goes, we have another chance now to do it right. And as recreation director back then, so many people said, wish you had a second floor, wish you had a second floor. Well, we're looking to see if we can get that second floor in there. Because it's back then, in 79, 1980, when it was rebuilt, they wanted to save money on it. And it kind of didn't work for the whole community. Now we have a chance to do that.
Another important aspect we're adding to the building, if you remember, we had bathroom facilities in the past, but they weren't heated, they weren't insulated. So come the winter, we had to shut them down.
Yeah.
Now, we still have a very active Belmar community in winter. There are a lot of people who still walk on the boardwalk and run the boardwalk and bike on the boardwalk. They would end up either running into 7-Eleven or right in 7-Eleven to Dunkin' Donuts.
Seagirt.
There too. And this will allow those bathroom facilities to be open year round. Not just the summer months to obviously when they're used the most by thousands of people who come here, but also in the winter months when they're used primarily just by folks that live here and are active in walking on the boardwalk as many are. Now the one pavilion you'll notice that we're not discussing tonight is the 13th Avenue Pavilion, where Matisse was. That looks like one we're gonna give more thought to. Initially we had thought of maybe doing a private-public partnership where we bring in a vendor that would actually construct it and operate it. But now that FEMA is going to go to a 90% cost share from a 75%, that means the beach utilities obligation goes from 25% to 10%. So it's going to cost the beach utilities 10% to rebuild that. There's less of an incentive to bring in a private developer to actually build the whole thing. In addition, there are a lot of people that I talk to that are getting used to and really appreciate the fact that there's a very openness to the boardwalk. The trailers are there, but they're obviously not as large as a building. We can still move forward building the 13th Avenue Pavilion and seeing what we'd end up putting there. But I think it's an interesting and worthwhile conversation to have and give it some time to have as to, what if we didn't rebuild that and everything else from 10th Avenue South, the bathroom trailers and what other trailers are there, what if they're removed come October 1, October 15th, and then from then on, from 10th Avenue South, it's just wide open. Now, I'm not saying I advocate one way or the other, but I think it's something that's worth having a discussion about and moving forward. But I think the advisory board has done a tremendous job under Brian's leadership with the 10th Avenue, 8th Avenue, and Taylor pavilions. And the reason why we want to get this moving tonight is because once the council decides on it, we have to move to construction drawings. And then before construction drawings, you have to do construction drawings before you go out to bid. Then we have to go out to bid, and these buildings are all going to require piles, and they're going to get a pile driver once again, putting them in. And these things are going to be built up to 2013 standards in the V zone, which means there's going to be significant construction going on. But I want to open this up to council members first. Any questions for, I guess, either for Brian or the architect?
I have a couple of remarks.
Oh, sure.
I also want to commend Councilman McGovern for the excellent job that he did in manning that committee. I know they started to meet in January, and there were many people who would come up to me and say, where is that? There was a great deal of interest in the committee. Where are they meeting? I have an idea. I would like to have input. And that was the purpose of the meeting. the meetings. So I think he did a fantastic job. He entertained everyone in terms of answering their questions, and a lot of what was said, I believe, was incorporated. Is that correct?
There's a lot of what the audience gave to the committee is, I can see that in the drawings and the plans, yes.
So it's, the drawings and the architectural renderings reflect community, and I think that that's a marvelous part of the process. I also want to support the idea and the importance of the tower. If you recall, over the past, not recently, but I guess a few years ago, we had many, not many, but more than we wanted ever, drownings throughout this particular area of the shore. Unfortunately, there are some people who cannot afford to go on the beach for whatever reason, and they choose to swim after hours. And that's where we lost a child in Bradley Beach. And very, very unfortunate. If that tower is there, and the lifeguards see, if Mr. Karatz and his crew sees that there are people lingering, they can put a man there in that particular tower, or a policeman, so that they are really, there's going to be oversight of those people, particularly our children. So I think that's vital. I also wanted to say, music to my ears was, as chair of the ADA committee, the American with Disabilities Act Committee, handicapped accessible, elevators, ramps, access to the buildings, so that everyone can enjoy pleasures of the activities in the buildings. I just think they're marvelous designs. We can go back and forth with the pros and cons of what some people feel are unnecessary, or they don't like the heights, but I can only tell you that I know Brian, I know that he listened, and I commend his committee, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I think that it's going to be a tremendous, tremendous benefit with those pavilions, particularly Taylor Pavilion. I know our women's club has met, that was our meeting place. So did you hear, ladies, the architect said a room for the Belmar Women's Club? Thank you so much, but I support the drawings. I see the need for the tower, and I love all the ADA components of the building. So that's all I have to say.
Any other comments, questions for?
Sure. Price tag, what are we looking at?
Well, before we price anything out, we want to get the council's input on it.
Baloney, come on, you guys have an idea. You guys had a thought of what it might cost.
Well, the boardwalk was put together pretty quickly. Remember, this is taking 7 months, so. Once the construction, the construction drawings are done. Once the construction drawings are done and they realize, more or less.
Okay, after tonight, just the process forward. We get construction drawings tonight, they come in, there's other presentations.
You don't get construction drawings tonight.
Well, I'm sorry, we get construction drawings together. Do we have another presentation?
On the construction drawing?
Yeah, I want to know price.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's not going to be a presentation. There's no point in doing a second presentation, same thing. Construction drawings are going to tell you measurements and things like that, but the most important thing construction drawings tell us would be the estimated price before we go out to bid.
We'll be back to get authorization.
Right. But we're not going to look at what the cost is if people don't want to do it.
I just can't believe it. So the engineer is saying you have no idea. He's done 1 million, 10 million, no idea. I asked engineers, I'm sorry. Engineers, you guys know nothing? No, nothing. No idea what the cost could be. What's that?
Right. They have not developed the cost estimate yet.
I'm really not against. I think the lifeguard building isn't bad. I'm not against this. I would just like to hear from my constituents. I just ask, give us a week. Give me a week to hear from my constituents before I make my decision. This is the first time
There's no vote tonight.
I know that, but you're going to want a yes or no to move forward with the drawings. And I would like, I would just, I can't, in 1 week. I don't know how putting something off 7 days or 2 weeks is gonna be that big of a deal, so.
Do you have any questions about the buildings? We'll take public comment in a little bit.
You know what, Colleen showed me a little bit Monday. I was at one of the meetings, we went over some stuff. They were redesigning it as of Monday. I have the paperwork. You know, I'm gonna think about this, I wanna look at it. I'm not making a decision right now.
We're not deciding.
Okay.
All right, Councilman Bigelow, you have any questions or?
Yeah, just a couple of questions about the drawings. Just didn't know the uniformity of the.
Can't hear you. Can you hear me now?
Go to the one Jim gave you.
Everything you're right.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a couple questions about the uniformity. We're looking at 8th and 10th, and, the pitches and roof, a lot of the triangular, with Taylor, I just noticed a lot of domes and round, just didn't know if there was any thought to, I know they all tie in, but I just didn't know about the pitch roofs on that.
Well, the slopes, the slopes are pretty much the same, but I think you're talking about the sharp tower type slope.
Correct.
There was we looked at that in the center, one of those on, we actually pulled it off at the last minute, but that's something we're definitely looking at again.
Okay, yeah, because there's several, there's the 2 large
Right.
domes, you've got the little windows,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. I appreciate everybody's input, especially Brian, since you've been here 92 years. So I do think that's very important, knowing about Taylor Pavilion, being the rec director. Some notes. The miniature golf, my biggest concern would be safety, which I know that they've addressed a lot of those questions. I like the fact that Taylor Pavilion, I strongly, I'm a big advocate of Taylor Pavilion in the past. Almost every, if not every birthday party I've had for my children was in Taylor Pavilion. So I do love the rooms there. With the Taylor Pavilion, they talked about the lobbies and having the Arts Council have kind of that gallery there. I think it would be really nice for the front gallery to have some representation of our historical society. So I think that'd be a great place to display it. I know we do it here, but I thought that'd be nice as well. And that's it. Did I mention the roof? Okay, thank you.
I have a question. With regard to FEMA, FEMA will be covering the cost of what was there, but not anything that we embellished or improved upon?
FEMA will pay us 90% of reconstruction of essentially what we lost, equivalency of what we lost.
And there's no cap on them?
Well, we are required to build to current codes and standards. So obviously, a 1970s or 1950s building is going to have many different components now when it's built in 2013, 2014. So FEMA doesn't come in with a flat cap. They come in to develop a project worksheet with us. They will be similar to the mayor illustrated how we added that last 1/10 of a mile to the boardwalk.
Correct.
We knew that was an ineligible cost. Thus, when we go into this project, we know that a second floor of Taylor didn't exist before, now would be an eligible cost of FEMA.
I think that's important for the audience to hear.
So that'll be broken out separately.
Yes.
I get that.
Just like that 1/10 of a mile, and that's not reimbursable at all. But we would know that, we would know that going into it once you had the bids come out. You have the estimate, but really you have a better idea of the cost once the bids come out.
So let me see if I understand this. Would FEMA representatives come in, look at the plans, review them with you and the mayor and whatever staff is involved, and give it an automatic okay to what, with the exception of any new addition?
Our approach to this would be very similar to the boardwalk, which is to bring them in early, before we even go out to bid. We
Correct.
would be reviewing the documents with them, having a very active conversation about things like second floors, different amenities that we might be adding that didn't exist before. And that way, at least our approach has been to show FEMA all of our cards going in. And then that way, at the time of public bid opening, there's a very Then we're really talking about costs, square
And-
footages, things of that sort.
And then to go to Councilman Dean's concern, you would have an idea of what they would give and what we
Exactly.
could afford.
Exactly. And
So
what we're really,
that's reasonable, I think.
Well, is this filled out before we build it or after we build it?
What?
The worksheet?
project worksheets are never finalized until after completion of rebuild, but the approach of the borough consistently has been that we're sitting with FEMA prior to going out to bid.
All right, but the boardwalk's done, correct? Has the FEMA workshop and work papers been turned in for that?
The boardwalk PW went in last week,
So after it's done built, then we basically turn it
then we
in?
go in.
But during the process,
You bring them
FEMA
in.
is a
Oh, yeah.
partner the entire time.
We're talking
So-
constantly.
Right, I mean, basically, we're gonna apply what we did to the boardwalk to the pavilions. Except the boardwalk was obviously a job that we rushed to get done in time, whereas the pavilions, as we mentioned before, Councilman Governor's advisory board have been meeting for, 7 months now, 6 months now, on these plans and on the design. The boardwalk obviously was much simpler, but, the boardwalk was built with, many more pilings, it was built with hurricane straps, there were many improvements. So even though it's not replacing what was existing before, it's replacing a boardwalk that existed before, but this one, I think, is substantially better than the one that was there before. And the idea is to take that same philosophy and that same practice and apply that to the pavilions that are gonna get rebuilt as well.
What's our time frame? What time frame does FEMA give us before we have to build something there?
18 months before we start construction?
I don't know if they're,
Yeah, the window of the disaster is typically 18 to 24 months. With Sandy especially, there's been an acknowledgement that the timing of the disaster and the rebuild process is taking more of a 2-year window.
All right, we are 8 months into it?
Approximately.
right. And the idea is to have these completed and up, just like Boardwalk was, in time for Memorial Day weekend next year. Get our lifeguards out of the trailers, go out to bid or negotiate with the leases for the tenants, and be up and running in time for Memorial Day weekend 2014.
I just hope that for those of you who were applauding about the finances, that maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable and reassured by hearing how we're going to go about this. Well, I just thought I would make that comment.
And we answered you.
If there's any more comments or questions from the council, I'd like to open it up for public. Here's how we're going to do it. Very, very simple. Just raise your hand. Wait to be called on. Come up to the microphone. We'll do 5 minutes per person. You can either ask questions or you can make comments, whatever you like. At the end of 5 minutes, you'll sit down, and we'll call on someone else to come up to the side.
Can I give my comments to somebody?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Mayor and Council.
Kevin O'Donnell, 604 Fifth Avenue, Belmar. Full disclosure, I am the beachfront director, but I am also a lifelong resident of Belmar. My parents grew up here. My parents were actually the first persons married at the Barclay when they put the new stairway in. I have 3 children who have gone through recreation programs, one who will be going through recreation programs, 6-year-old. One of the things that I remember from my time growing up here was going down to the boardwalk at night and playing miniature golf on the 16th Avenue miniature golf and trying to get the hole in one into the fish's mouth. I wasn't allowed to cross the street to the arcade over there, so that was where we hung out. We spent nights at Tabs, which was down there, and that miniature golf course. And after the storm took it, I think Belmar lost an opportunity to replace it, and I think that's something that's been sorely missing ever since that one was gone. You countlessly hear people talking about how there are not things for our children to do during the summertime. I had a woman who came down yesterday and said, it's raining, we want to go on the beach. And I said, well, the storm's going to go over in about a half an hour. Her question to me was, well, what can we do in the meantime? And I didn't really have an answer for her because there aren't really many recreation opportunities down there. I understand that there were people that were thinking we shouldn't put buildings back there. I think that's a huge mistake. That building is used all the time. I spent 10 years as a lifeguard on 7th Avenue and started the junior lifeguard program in the 90s. And that was shelter for us when we had lightning storms. Right now, we're dancing very precarious dance. If we have bad weather coming, we don't have a place for our children to get out of harm's way, whether it's arts and crafts or the junior lifeguard program. We would run tournaments down there, and we would have places for food down there. I attended many soccer awards meetings in that pavilion. I think it's a wonderful idea to have a place where we can spend our times, and why not do it all year round? All year round is going to be more for the benefit of the residents than for the visitors. There have been countless things that have, MS walks, the Belmar 5-mile run, people asking where are they going to be able to register, where are we going to be able to check in the morning, things like that. I think it would be a big mistake to not replace these buildings, and I applaud Councilman McGovern for heading up that committee and taking the concerns of the residents in, and I was one that was a proponent of a second floor. I think there's nothing better than growing up in Belmar and spending your time down at the beachfront and being able to look out and enjoy. I know I would bring my family to parties down there. And on the lifeguard side, absolutely. There were times when water gets really bad, and you need to be able to see that entire beach. I know post-Sandy, there were awful lot of people that wanted to jump in that ocean and surf, one of them being my child. And having a lifeguard station where they could be up in that tower, the police were overworked as it was, but being able to successfully see out in that entire beachfront and know where there are people trying to go on the water, that would be invaluable. And if you can save one life, then it's well worth the cost. And I live over by Havens and Hamptons, and when there was talks of the original development, I said, well, my view of the river is going to be blocked. You're not guaranteed a view of the water, okay? Very plain and simple, but that view's always been there. You're not guaranteed of a view of the water. So, what may inconvenience some people, maybe you've got to look maybe another 10, 20 yards to the north or the south to see the ocean. And I think if I'm correct, in this local area, we're one of the only beachfront municipalities that doesn't have a tower for our lifeguards. That's it.
Thank you. Sure, Mark.
Mark Fitzgerald, 1902 Surf Avenue, Belmar, and I am a member of the advisory committee. I want to let everyone know that before I speak. Have been a homeowner here since 1991, I believe, when we first bought the house. And I sense in the room, and I don't think we need to view this negatively, but there's obviously a concern for the financials. And Councilman Bean, I think you're right to raise that as an issue. And someone who has rebuilt a house, actually a few different houses over time, the first thing you do is you engage with an architect and you put together a list of drawings and a wish list of what you'd like it to be. Okay, that's the stage that we're at right now. Then you move to a stage that says, okay, now how much is this going to cost? And then you move to the stage for how we're going to pay for it. And of course, in that process, there's some things that might have to be changed to make it be more in line with the budget and what the rest of the town's going to want. And this is just a larger scale of that, right? We're building 3 fairly significant buildings. And, I just think that we have to give this time to let it play out. And then when we get those answers, then finalize some of these decisions.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Normally when I go to an architect, he has a range of what I can afford.
I think that's a fair question, and coming up with a per square foot type, like large scale estimate, I think we could ask them to do that now that we've got finalized plans. These plans have changed so many times that I think that would have been a waste of time asking that prior to today. Okay. But I do want to say the greater good is we're building a legacy here for our children and our grandchildren. I don't know about you, but our house will never be sold. You know, it's going to go to our son and then his son and their family. And I think what we're doing here is a very large calling, if you will, not to get sappy about it, but, and I think we all need to stand back and realize that we're building something for the next 100 years, and do it once and do it right.
Hi, Joy DeSantis, 101 6th Avenue. I'm really emotional right now. I've been trying for 7 days to get information that you are telling me is readily available on this project. I've gone to the township, I've submitted an Oprah request, and I've absolutely been denied any access to anything. At one point, a piece of paper was waved in front of me of the rendering, and I was told I was absolutely forbidden to have it because it was not an approved plan. I've never heard of an approved plan for an illustration. But moving forward, we've acknowledged, and it's indisputable, that FEMA will not pay for a second floor. Who's going to pay for it?
To be financed on the beach utility.
Is the beach
We could use
utility,
that money to reduce taxes instead.
the beach utility, the surplus for the beach,
This is a public meeting, so you're not going to speak out publicly. If you want to speak out publicly, raise your hand, wait to be called on, come up to the microphone. Don't interrupt this woman while she's speaking. I apologize for this.
that's okay. The beach utility surplus has already been exhausted. That's the surplus we're legally bound to have in case of emergencies. So first we have to address, do we even have a beach utility? And then we have to address how are we going to replenish the beach utility surplus that's been exhausted because we desperately needed it when we were moving so quickly after Sandy. But happily, the urgency of Sandy is over. And now we can take a deep breath and we can really consider how we want to move forward in this town. And for me, you know, you were very kind to mention that you didn't want the miniature golfers, the noise of those children, to annoy the residents over there on 10th or 8th or wherever it is. But now you're proposing a banquet hall with alcohol, with DJs, with food, with garbage, with staffing, with all types of services necessary to support it. You have electricity, you have all types of maintenance on the building. Who's going to pay for all of that? Is it going to be offset with a nominal fee to rent the hall?
Well, to answer your question, we're not going to be in the business of providing those services. We're going to provide a room. If you would like to have a party there, you got to get your own caterers. You got to bring your own stuff. There are going to be tables and chairs.
Oh, I understand that. I'm not talking about that.
Pay a fee for it, but there's no staff. We're not going to.
Well, who's going to take out the garbage of that big party?
Right, well, we had the tail building before, and you could do parties.
But we didn't have 250 people dancing and drinking. But even, let's moving forward. While it's a lovely idea to have the township committee have a meeting in this spectacular building, is it really necessary that you have a view of the ocean? Can we not put you in a different place? Can we not keep it to one floor? Can we not figure out how to open up the bottom floor to accommodate this banquet that apparently everybody seems to be in line with, except for me? And I just want to say that we're still repairing on 6th Avenue. Our infrastructure is gone, and you know it, and you've known this. How can you even contemplate a structure of this size? And by the way, the size was never even addressed. How tall is it? Well, we're really clear. Somebody lied about a brochure that put the height wrong. Okay, so now we know that the height is kind of close to the boardwalk, maybe 5 feet higher, maybe not. Maybe you said it was even. How tall is it? Is it 45 feet tall?
We give a height.
And is the footprint the same?
Yes.
The footprint's the same, okay. So the height, what's the height?
We'll find out.
I appreciate that.
Any other questions you have? While he's finding out?
Well, what I'm saying is, what are you doing with the infrastructure? I know that there was a $5 million bond that was just taken out to repair the infrastructure that desperately needs it, some of which is a problem because of Sandy, and some of which is just old. Why would we even contemplate putting in an aquarium when my basement is full of sewerage?
I'll answer that, and that's 5 minutes, so we'll get you the height.
This gotta stop. This
Completely different. You know, and this is one of the questions I get from people who still aren't back in their homes. Hold on. You know, and I get this from people who are still back in their homes, how, you know, all of our businesses are back, but not all the residents are back. How our boardwalk is back, but our residents are not back. And the reason why is the way FEMA is set up. So it's set up initially to clean up after disaster. That's the first thing. The second is to rebuild public buildings and infrastructure that was damaged by the storm itself. Public, not private, so no home. The third is hazard mitigation. The hazard mitigation is going to be reimbursed at 75%, whereas the cleanup and the rebuild is being reimbursed at 90%. So the hazard mitigation is the third part and completely separate. Now, where you live, obviously you had some serious damage because of the lake. Ocean came in and filled the lake and then filled your house, I'm sure, and your neighbor's homes. So we're looking at putting an outflow pipe that would run down A Street. Now, outflow pipe was not there before Sandy. It wasn't damaged because of Sandy because it didn't exist before Sandy. So it's a form of hazard mitigation. Now, the hazard mitigation is a different pool of money where you need to get prior approval before you can begin. So for the boardwalk, as Colleen Connolly mentioned, we just submitted the worksheet after completion. Now, we engaged FEMA the entire time to know what was going on, but for hazard mitigation, we can't even start. We can't go out to bid. We can't bond. We can't do anything until we have approval. Now, today, actually of all days, Governor Christie was in Belmar with a business up on Ocean Avenue, Eastern Mines. Eastern Mines was giving grant money for the state. And I had an opportunity to talk with him, and I told him the concerns that I have, and you know, Brian McGovern has, because he lives on Silver Lake as well, and that is regarding the outflow pipe and other forms of hazard mitigation. He told me that the hazard mitigation should be coming out at the beginning of August. So about a month is when they're going to start picking those projects. And our project hopefully will be one of the ones picked. Now once it's picked, that's when we can go out to bond. That's when we can go out to bid. In the meantime, we're not going to wait. And we're going to have our engineers design it, know exactly what we want to do, how we want to do it. But because the way FEMA operates, it's a third leg of the recovery. It takes a longer time. So that's why the boardwalk was able to be rebuilt quickly, because it existed beforehand. There's no form of hazard mitigation yet. The engineered dune system that we want to put in to protect the boardwalk and protect homes like yours from future storm surges, we want to do that at the same time as the boardwalk, because it seemed to make sense because the construction company was here. However, because that's a form of hazard mitigation, it has to wait. Now, it's going to be more expensive for that project because the economies of scale would have been better having it done when the construction company is here, but it's still worthwhile doing. You know, the federal government will end up paying more, our beach utility is going to pay more, but it's something that's necessary, much like the outflow pipe is necessary for your home. So the reason why it looks like public projects like the boardwalk are getting done sooner than private is because the private money is coming in slower. The other thing I talked with the governor about today is community development block grant money of up to $150,000 per household that was negatively impacted. Now, not up to him, but federal guidelines say that 75% of that can only go to low and moderate income families. Well, a low or moderate income family means a family under $60,000 a year in Belmar. It's hard to live in Belmar under $60,000 a year. So there's gonna be a lot of families that don't qualify. Because then there's that 25% where you could get it, but it's very competitive, and not for nothing, we're competing against towns like Union Beach, Seabright, Ortley, up and down the coast, Tom River, and Brick. So, but he said that money too is gonna be coming out into the fold. So these programs are gonna be coming for private residents like yours, and other hazard mitigation projects like the public one we want to do, like the outflow pipe or the engineered tune system. But it's not coming out as quickly as the cleanup was and as rebuilding what was existing, like the boardwalk. So I don't want anyone to think that, wow, they're prioritizing the boardwalk over other things. That's not true. But it doesn't make sense not to do the boardwalk because we have to wait for hazard mitigation to be approved. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for us to wait on doing a building like this when we start the process because hazard mitigation isn't been approved yet. Hopefully that answers your question.
Height, Greg? You have it?
Height,
38 feet to, from finished floor to high wall.
38 feet.
So the ones across the street are 35 feet, the homes are 35 feet, we're talking 38.
Finished floor. That's finished floor. Finished floor, which is elevated.
All right, David,
Oh, David Shack, 302 C Street.
hold on a second, let David speak, please.
That's 38 feet higher than the 5 feet that's already elevated, right? And, I haven't seen that flyer, but, I don't know about the 18 feet. I understood it was 5 feet. And, one recommendation I made that, I'm sorry?
Flyer says he.
Oh, well, anyway, I haven't seen that, but, I did say as long as we have 5 feet of dead space under these buildings and there's such long waiting lines for beach lockers from the, for the residents, I was wondering if you looked into, incorporating beach lockers built into the beach side of the elevated, and
Can be done.
that can be done. You could probably put 20, 30 beach lockers, it's big buildings, right? There's a long waiting line for beach lockers, right?
Yes.
So,
Whether or not they want to have that locker in Fifth Avenue, a lot of people, like if they go to Ninth Avenue,
well, I think a lot of people would just go to whatever beach they could get a locker on. It's so convenient. We have a locker, and it makes a big difference not having to schlep all your stuff down to the beach. So I would like to see that done at the two buildings that space is going to be available underneath. Okay, next is FEMA's going to pay 90% of the value of what was there before, right?
No, much like the boardwalk. So the previous boardwalk, the value is not nearly as much as the existing boardwalk because, again, we're putting more pilings, we put in hurricane straps, we put in more wood, we made it stronger, we used an upgraded material instead of old track. So it's not about replacing exactly what was there before. It's replacing what was there before, but with, so in other words, these new buildings are gonna have pilings, it's gonna be built up to standard.
Okay, but it's also going to be like twice as big. They're all going to be like twice as big and such. So FEMA's probably ultimately going to pay, somewhere around maybe half or something. But that is my guess. But because it's a much more extensive building. But well, time will tell. But one thing I do want to comment on, and as far as Silver Lake and this and everything else is, sometimes it's getting to look like FEMA runs this town and not us. It's like we have to ask FEMA permission to do anything. And I would like to see, that we make our own decisions here and not be, maybe just have our hand out for FEMA and just always asking FEMA what we can do and when we can do it and all that. So I really get a little tired of, FEMA calling all the shots here, The people in Silver Lake, they're waiting to, protect their houses and they don't want to wait for FEMA to dawdle around. But I gotta speak fast because I see you looking at the clock there. One point I want to make is that all this talk about the lookout tower, I haven't heard anyone oppose that. That's like a straw man argument. People are concerned about safety. I haven't heard a single person ever say we should not have the lookout tower. I think we're pretty much unanimous on that. So I don't think you need to keep saying how important it is. We all agree it's important and that we should do it, and I don't think there's anyone in the room against it. I may be wrong, but I hope I'm not. about the openness that people might enjoy at the south end. We might enjoy openness at the north end too, you know? And, you know, I'm not saying don't build Tower Pavilion, but it is gonna be like towering over us over there. And another thing to consider is in the afternoon when the sun's back to the west, it's gonna be putting a lot of shade on the beach where people are gonna be wanting to lay in the sun. So people are gonna have to, you know, move out of that area because it's gonna be in the shade, probably starting about 2 o'clock in the afternoon or so, if I'm not mistaken, because it's, with the 5 feet, it's gonna be 40-something feet up in the air, 43 feet, or whatever it's gonna be with the 5 feet. That's definitely gonna throw a lot of the beach into the shade, you know, and not have that part of the beach be available for sunbathers.
Let me finish, please.
Okay, and I think I've covered almost everything. Well, one thing is, as you know, there's a lawsuit pending on the beachfront development, and I was wondering if we go ahead with all this, if the lawsuit is gonna, like, after we put it out to bid and do all this stuff, is there any possibility that this lawsuit is gonna put a stop to it, right? Aren't they, isn't the lawsuit attempting to stop this beachfront redevelopment, or at least have it done in a way that they feel complies with the law? Apparently whoever brought the lawsuit feels that we're not complying with the law on it. You know, I'm sure you disagree, but what I'm asking is, maybe we should see, you know, before we invest too much energy in it, if the lawsuit, you know, is going to be found to have any merit or not.
Thank you, David.
Actually, Dave, I have a quick question. I think you have a very good point. Is there any way, Mayor, that when we do all these drawings and put them out for bid, that we could separate them into 3 different bids instead of throwing all buildings into one?
Well, what we're gonna do, because we wanna try to get the, you know, we're gonna probably do, 1 bid for all 3. And then, like we did with the boardwalk, we're gonna do, okay, what if you were just gonna build 10? What if you just build 8 that? What would you just build 10? My guess is, we'll probably get the best price, someone doing all 3. But maybe I'm wrong. But that's why we're gonna go out to bid like that.
Yeah, well, you said we would get the best price if we rushed the boardwalk, and then it turns out other towns didn't really pay more, you know. So I think, I was brought up to believe and was told and learned that if you take your time and you were really careful and did everything, that's the way you save money, not by rushing. But, okay, thank you.
And you have to pay less per unit for the boardwalk, is not true.
So I didn't say pay less, I said they didn't pay more.
Well, that's because they built smaller boardwalk.
Mr. Northgrave, can I ask you a question? Mr. Schneck just brought up the point about not to speak to the lawsuit.
Thank you.
Would the lawsuit in any way impact the progress of the development of the buildings?
We're talking about the lawsuit challenging the boardwalk redevelopment?
Yes,
The
sir.
designation.
Wouldn't? Not at all. Thank you.
And remember, the nice thing about America is you could sue anyone over anything at any time. So, we call it a lawsuit, but people have to file.
Joan Corallo, Bay Street. These buildings, they all look nice, all that kind of stuff. But the older buildings had sitting areas where the public sat. Are we still going to have any kind of a sitting, or has the whole piece of real estate been taken up with the building?
You would have sitting areas, and they're all going to be ADA accessible on both sides, and also the east side of the building.
So, as you can see, there's decking that, then depending on.
Right, so there is, because we do have them now, and then people do use them.
Flanking on both sides, there's seating area. Plenty of
Also,
see right over here? Right around the back.
okay, got you. After the storms of '92 and during the Pringle years, they increased the size of the 8th Avenue Pavilion. And they did it without a CAFRA permit, and there was a lawsuit. And they didn't make them take it down, but they made them have public access. If you notice, there was a plaque on the building. Does anybody recall that? So how does this new concept, did we lose that public access at all times kind of thing. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, at 8th Avenue,
Right.
where they had this seating, it wasn't just for their patrons, it could have been someone
that
at the
was-
beach who just wanted to go in, you couldn't stop them from going
Right.
in and sitting down.
That
because
was the
that's what it's all about.
toss-off from the lawsuit. So how
Right.
does our new 8th Avenue,
Same way.
same thing, you'll have public, you don't have to go in and dine and you're outside dining?
No, you can sit.
Right.
We'll treat it.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Bill Strauss, Oakwood Road. I was at the planning meeting, Brian, and it was really great, the way everything, you wrote everything down, so, and I'm glad it doesn't look like Days Inn anymore.
You know,
Councilman Bean, I'm going to assume that we have the money for my questions here. I'm not going to deal with money. This question is mostly for the engineers. From the level of the first floor, how deep does the elevator shaft need to go into the sand? Does anybody know that question?
It depends on what type of elevator that we use, the pitless elevator, we really haven't got that far.
Well, because my concern is elevator maintenance with salt water in the sand is a nightmare, right? So that has to be taken into consideration. I didn't see any plans or any reference to that, but as an engineer, former engineer, I know that's a major point. The other thing is a request to the council and the designers. If you're gonna put a miniature golf course up, and I said this to Brian at the meeting, don't just get a crappy one. You've gotta get a putt-putt. I'm telling you, because if you're a miniature golfer, there's a difference, and putt-putt has tournaments every year. If you're gonna put a miniature golf course up there, I played the one in the marina, and it's not designed well. Okay, I'm sorry. It's not designed well. But if you're gonna put a miniature golf course up there and spend all the money, get one that's good, a putt-putt. All right, and I don't know who's gonna come up with that. But, you know, you're talking about this, there used to be one in Point Pleasant, it was fabulous, if you've ever played miniature golf. The other thing is, with the Taylor Pavilion, you've also got an elevator in that one as well, okay? And you've got a second floor. Now, I don't know, as an ADA, I'm very happy to have an elevator, but my concern is the flooding. I think the library elevator is still flooded, so we don't need that expense. Thank you.
The gentleman's concern about the elevator and the flooding and
No,
sand.
I'm sorry, I didn't know if you heard me. There's different style elevators, pitless elevator. Because the elevation that we're at and where the sand is, that pit may not even be by the sand.
Okay,
So
so it might not be a
that's part of the
concern.
construction drawings that the mayor's.
So you've taken that into consideration. Thank you.
Goodbye.
It's kind of low, isn't it? I'm short, but I'm not that short. Doug Sweeney, and I live at 1401 Ocean Avenue. And we're relatively new to Belmar, but my wife's family has been here since 1944, so we're not that new. I've got 4 comments I'd like to make. The first one is on the pavilion that wasn't discussed tonight at all, and that's the 13th Avenue Pavilion. And it is, kind of suspiciously absent from this whole discussion. Matt made some points about different ideas. Everyone I've spoken to in our area, and we're the one part of the ocean front where there are no commercial establishments. It's all residential for 3 blocks in either direction from the 13th Avenue Pavilion. And the rumor mill, which is often inaccurate, had thought that there might be an alcohol distribution point there or a restaurant of some sort built, that there are extra liquor licenses in town available, and someone might apply to, in fact, build a restaurant there that would have, or a bar that would have liquor. And everyone in our area is, I would just say, violently opposed to that, those who live on the ocean front. Second question on that, I don't know if McDonald's still has any legal rights to that lease that would be continued?
Last year, I think 2012, it ended.
It ended, okay. So they wouldn't, so they have no legal hold on that for putting a restaurant in or anything along those lines?
There won't be a McDonald's.
The second one is on funding, and I too am just concerned about the funding piece of this and where it might lead to, or that FEMA might not come through with everything that they might do. We have an elevator in our house that wasn't covered by our insurance. It wasn't the depth of the pit, it was the controls and the other pieces, and it cost between $10,000 and $12,000 to have to repair it out of pocket. So the elevators, we have since learned, are very expensive things when you're near the ocean. The third question is just the viability of building a big structure in an area that has just been destroyed due to this climate change, this unusual event. And that's one of the things I just keep wondering about. And the bigger that you make it and the higher you make some of these buildings, not the tower. I think the tower is a terrific idea. The last point is, at one point we talked about building a tower so that we could have some cell phone towers and get the revenue from that, which the Mayfair actually, I think, went on and did. And the question just simply is, are we thinking along those lines as a revenue opportunity off of the lifeguard tower?
We'll look at it. But,
Okay.
you know, my guess is you're right across the street, they're higher on the Mayfair, so why would they move?
Last point, when FEMA looks at things like the number of bathrooms, if we have a separate, it sounded like we were going to have separate bathrooms for the police and first aid and lifeguards, as opposed to a common access and a single bathroom. I would think that'd be the sort of thing, if I was in FEMA, I would say, why do you need that? Sounds extravagant, or something that we could be more efficient on. Okay? That's it.
And just to put sort of that rumor to bed, you can't bring a liquor license onto public property. So if you own a liquor license in town, you can't move it to public property. The only time you can have a license on a public property has to be a state concessionaire license, like Ninth Avenue Pavilion, which we should all be at right now as opposed to here, but that's yes, sir. Eyes rolling down.